April 25, 1945, 16 beneath the Right Chancellery Garden, Joseph Goebbels sits at a small wooden table, snorts, his face illuminated by the weak yellow light of a single bulb. The concrete walls around him tremble. Dust drifts down from the ceiling with each Soviet shell impact. Somewhere above, Berlin is dying block by block, building by building, and in this moment, a messenger arrives with news that will shatter even Goebbels' carefully constructed reality. The Soviet pincers have met. North and South, Zhukov's and KV's armies have joined hands at Ketten, west of the city. Berlin is now completely surrounded. 2.5 million Soviet troops form an unbreakable ring. There will be no relief, there will be no escape, there will be no miracle. For 12 years, Joseph Goebbels has been the voice of Nazi Germany, the right minister of propaganda, the man who could spin any defeat into victory, any retreat into strategic repositioning, any disaster into temporary setback. He has controlled the narrative, shaped the story, commanded the words that flowed into millions of German homes. But now in this underground tomb, even Goebbels must confront a story that cannot be rewritten. This is what happened when the master propagandist learned that the final chapter had begun. To understand this moment, you must first understand the man. Joseph Goebbels, 47 years old, barely 5'5" in tall, walks with a pronounced limp from childhood osteomyelitis. He has always compensated for his physical limitations with an extraordinary gift for language. Words are his weapons, rhetoric is his armor, and for over a decade he has wielded these tools with devastating effectiveness. He discovered radio's power early. While other Nazi leaders relied on rallies and newspapers, Goebbels understood that a voice in every German living room was worth 1,000 speeches in beer halls. He made Hitler's voice intimate, familiar, a presence at the dinner table. He turned propaganda into entertainment, wrapped ideology and music and drama, made the party's message inescapable, and he believed that is crucial. Goebbels was not merely a cynical manipulator, though he was certainly that. He genuinely worshipped Hitler, genuinely embraced the Nazi vision, genuinely thought Germany would triumph. His fanaticism was real. His propaganda worked on him as much as on his audience. But by April 1945, even Goebbels' reality is cracking. The previous week, on April 20th, Hitler's 56th birthday, the last major Nazi leaders gathered in the bunker. Göring was there. Himmler, SHP, Ribbentrop, Bormann, the inner circle, what remained of it. The birthday celebration was surreal. Above ground, Soviet artillery was already hitting Berlin's eastern suburbs. The distant rumble of guns provided a bass note to the awkward festivities. One by one, they urged Hitler to leave. Fly south to Berchtesgaden, continue the fight from the Alpine redoubt. There were still loyal troops in Bavaria, in Austria. The war could continue. Hitler refused. Berlin was where he would make his stand. Berlin was where the kick would either be saved or perish. Most of the leaders fled that day. Göring headed south, already planning to assume leadership. Himmler slipped away to pursue his secret peace negotiations with the Allies. Shah departed after a final emotional farewell. They read the situation clearly. This was the end, but Goebbels stayed. He moved his entire family into the bunker. His wife Magda elegant and devoted. A true believer herself and their 6 children. Helga 12 years old, Hilda 11, Helmut 9, Hold 7, Hoff 5, Hader 3, 6 children with names carefully chosen to echo Hitler, 6 children who would never see May. Trudel Junge, one of Hitler's secretaries, watched them arrive. The children seemed excited, she later recalled. They thought they were going on an adventure. The bunker was like a cave, something from a fairy tale. They ran through the narrow corridors, their voices echoing off concrete walls. They didn't understand that their parents had brought them to their tomb. Goebbels maintained his routines. Every day he still wrote propaganda. He still broadcast to whatever German forces could receive him. He still issued orders to newspapers that no longer existed radio stations that had been overrun. The propaganda ministry building above ground was a shattered ruin, but Goebbels continued as if the machinery of the state still functioned. On April 19th, he made his final radio address to the nation. His voice, that familiar instrument of persuasion, crackled across the airwaves. He spoke of final victory, of secret weapons, of the enemy's imminent collapse, of Germany's resurrection from this trial by fire. It was a masterpiece of the form. Even then, even with Soviet tanks entering the city's outskirts, Goebbels could weave words into hope. Soldiers in isolated pockets, cut off from all news, heard that broadcast and believed relief was coming. Civilians huddled in cellars heard it and felt a flicker of faith that perhaps somehow this would all turn out right, but in the bunker, Goebbels knew better. Ruus Miss, Hitler's bodyguard and telephonist, operated the switchboard in the bunker's communication room. He watched Goebbels closely during those final days. What struck him was the duality in Hitler's presence. Goebbels was animated, confident, full of plans and strategies. He spoke of Wenck's 12th Army marching to relieve Berlin. He discussed how Steiner's attack from the north would break the Soviet encirclement. He painted scenarios of victory with the same skill he'd used in 1,000 propaganda pieces, but alone, so with Magda. Goebbels was different, quieter. His face sagged, the energy drained away. He moved like a man already dead, just going through the motions until his body caught up with his spirit. The bunker itself was a strange world. 30 to 40 people crammed into a space designed for far fewer. The upper bunker, the fore bunker, connected to the deeper fur bunker by a spiral staircase. Hitler occupied rooms in the lower level. Goebbels and his family had rooms in the upper section. Guards, secretaries, adjutants, doctors, all squeezed into the remaining spaces. The air was thick, stale, recycled through inadequate ventilation. The smell of unwashed bodies, of fierce sweat, of the chemical toilets, permeated everything. The lights flickered with each nearby explosion. Water came in limited supply. Food was dwindling. They ate from cans from the Reich Chancellor's dwindling stores, from whatever soldiers could scavenge from the ruins above. And the children played. That was perhaps the most disturbing element. While adults discussed strategy and defeat, while Hitler raged and wept, while Magda Goebbels moved through the bunker like a ghost, the 6 children played hide-and-seek in the corridors. They sang songs. They asked when they could go home. Helmut, the only boy, 9 years old, wore a uniform his mother had made for him, a miniature soldier. He saluted the guards who saluted back, their faces carefully neutral. The girls in their matching dresses seemed like something from a different world, a world that no longer existed above ground. April 21st. Soviet troops entered Berlin proper. Not just the suburbs now, but the city itself. Zhukov's forces pushed from the east, KVS from the south. They moved block by block, building by building. German resistance was fierce, but ultimately futile. Old men of the Volkssturm. The People's Militia stood with Panzerasts against T-34 tanks. Hitler Youth, boys of 14 and 15, threw themselves into battle with more courage than sense. SS units fought with fanatical determination, knowing they would receive no mercy if captured. The city became an inferno. Soviet artillery pounded everything. Katyusha rockets screamed overhead. Buildings collapsed into rubble. Fires raged unchecked. Civilians huddled in cellars, in subway tunnels, anywhere underground. The dead lay in the streets. No one could bury them. No one could even move them. Berlin was becoming a necropolis. In the bunker, the reports came in, each one worse than the last. The Soviets had taken this district, that bridge, this government building. The ring was tightening. Goebbels still issued orders. He commanded the Berlin garrison to fight to the last man. He declared that any soldier who retreated would be shot. He sent messages to units that no longer existed, demanding they counterattack, demanding they hold positions they'd lost days ago. General Helmuth Widling, appointed commandant of Berlin on April the 23rd, tried to bring reality to the bunker. He was a professional soldier, a veteran of the Eastern Front, a man who understood military realities. He reported the true situation to Hitler and Goebbels. His forces were running out of ammunition, out of fuel, out of everything. The Soviets outnumbered them 10 to 1, 20 to 1 in some sectors. Goebbels listened to these reports with a strange expression. Miss, watching from his post, couldn't quite read it. Was it acceptance, denial? Some mixture of both. Hitler still spoke of relief. Wenck's army was coming. Felix Steiner would attack from the north. The Americans would realize their mistake and join Germany against the Bolsheviks. It was fantasy, delusion, the last gasps of a mind that could not accept reality, but Goebbels knew. He had always been more intelligent than Hitler, more capable of clear analysis when he chose to employ it. He knew Wenck's army was a broken force, barely able to defend itself, let alone march to Berlin's rescue. He knew Steiner's attack had never materialized because Steiner didn't have enough forces to attack anything. He knew the Americans were racing the Soviets to see who could grab more German territory, not preparing to switch sides. The propaganda minister understood that the story was ending. He just didn't know how to say it out loud. April 24th, the Soviet noose grew tighter. Forces from north and south were converging. Soon they would meet. Soon Berlin would be completely cut off. Already the airports were under fire. The last flights out had departed days ago. The roads were death traps. Anyone trying to leave the city ran into Soviet patrols. Soviet tanks, Soviet artillery. That night, Goebbels sat with Magda in their small room. Traut, Junge passing by heard them talking. Their voices were low, intimate. Magda was crying, not loud, dramatic sobs, but quiet, steady tears. Goebbels held her hand. They were discussing the children. Magda had made her decision. The children would not survive this. She would not allow them to grow up in a world without National Socialism. She would not let them be captured by the Soviets, raised as communists, taught to despise everything their parents believed in. Better they die as martyrs, better they die pure. It was madness, of course, monstrous madness. But in the bunker, in that underground tomb with the world collapsing overhead, madness had become normal. The twisted logic of fanaticism made murder seem like mercy. Goebbels agreed with his wife. He had always agreed with his wife on matters concerning the children. Magda was the stronger one in that regard. Goebbels, for all his public ferocity, was softer with his family, but he would not contradict her. He could not. To do so would be to admit that everything they believed was wrong, and that admission was impossible. April 25th, early afternoon, the messenger arrives with the news. Soviet forces from Zhukov's 1st Belarusian Front advancing from the east have met troops from KV's 1st Ukrainian Front pushing up from the south. They joined at Ketina-Bossi upon small town west of Berlin. The encirclement is complete. Goebbels receives the report in the conference room. Several officers are present. Widling is there. Krebs, the chief of staff, a few others. The messenger, a young lieutenant, delivers the information with a flat, exhausted voice. He has not slept in 3 days. His uniform is torn and filthy. He smells of smoke and blood. The room goes silent. Widling later described Goebbels' reaction. The propaganda minister sat very still. His face, normally so animated, so expressive, went blank. For perhaps 10 seconds he said nothing. He simply stared at the map on the table, at the red lines marking Soviet positions, at the shrinking blue pocket that represented Berlin. Then he spoke. His voice was quiet, almost conversational. "So it is done," he said. "The ring is closed. Someone mentioned Wenck, the 12th Army. Perhaps they could still break through." Goebbels looked up. His eyes, Widling recalled, were strange, not quite focused, as if he were seeing something beyond the room, beyond the bunker, beyond the present moment. "Wenck is not coming," Goebbels said. "Steiner is not coming. No one is coming. We are alone." It was the first time anyone in the bunker had heard him state the truth so plainly. No propaganda, no spin, no hopeful reinterpretation, just the bare brutal fact. The meeting continued. They discussed defensive positions, ammunition supplies, how long the garrison could hold. Goebbels participated mechanically, offering suggestions, approving plans, but something had changed. The energy, the manic certainty that had driven him for 12 years was gone. After the meeting, he returned to his family's quarters. Magda was reading to the children a fairy tale. Helga, the oldest, sat close to her mother, too old to fully believe in fairy tales anymore, but wanting to maintain the illusion for her younger siblings. The little ones listened with wide eyes. Goebbels stood in the doorway watching. Miss passing through the corridor saw him there. The propaganda minister's face was wet with tears. He made no sound, no movement. He just stood there crying, silently watching his children. That evening, Goebbels visited Hitler. The Führer was in his sitting room, slumped in a chair. He looked ancient. His hands trembled constantly now. Parkinson's disease, some said. Others thought it was just the accumulated stress. the weight of defeat manifesting physically. They talked for over an hour. No one else was present, so we don't know exactly what was said. But afterward, both men seemed calmer, resolved. They had made their decisions. Hitler would commit suicide. He would not be captured. He would not be paraded through Moscow in chains displayed as a trophy for Stalin. He would die on his own terms, in his own time, and Goebbels would stay with him until the end, then follow him into death. The propaganda continued bizarrely. On April the 26th, German radio still broadcast messages of hope. Goebbels had pre-recorded statements. They played on loop, telling soldiers to hold fast, telling civilians that relief was coming, telling the world that Germany would never surrender. But in the bunker, preparations for death were underway. Hitler began dictating his will, his political testament, his final messages to the German people and history. Traudl Junge typed as he spoke, her fingers trembling on the keys. The Führer blamed everyone but himself. The generals had betrayed him. The German people had proven unworthy. International jewelry had orchestrated everything. It was a document of delusion and denial. In one of his final acts, Hitler appointed Goebbels as Reich Chancellor. The propaganda minister would be for approximately 24 hours the leader of Nazi Germany. It was a hollow honor, a title without power, a position without purpose. But Goebbels accepted it with grave formality. April 27th, 28th, 29th. The days blurred together, above ground. The battle raged. Soviet forces were now within blocks of the Reich Chancellery. Machine gun fire echoed through the ruined streets. Tank cannons boomed. The smell of cordite and death drifted down into the bunker through the ventilation shafts. The children still played, but more quietly now. They sensed something was wrong. Helga, the oldest, asked her mother when they could leave, when they could go home. Magda smiled and said, soon, very soon, they would all be together somewhere beautiful, somewhere peaceful. Goebbels spent hours writing. His final propaganda piece, a testament to National Socialism, a justification of everything they had done. He wrote about sacrifice and glory, about dying for a cause, about how future generations would understand and honor their choice. It was eloquent, powerful, completely insane. April 30th afternoon, Hitler married Ove Braun in a brief civil ceremony. Then he said his goodbyes. He shook hands with the remaining staff. He thanked them for their service. He released them from their oaths, told them to try to escape if they could. Goebbels was one of the last to see him. They spoke briefly. Hitler gave him some personal items. A painting, a signed photograph, meaningless gestures at the end of the world. Then Hitler and Ove Braun retired to his private quarters. A single gunshot rang out, then silence. Goebbels stood outside the door, waiting. When Hitler's valet emerged and confirmed what everyone knew, Goebbels nodded slowly. He went to tell Magda. She received the news with eerie calm. Now we can go too, she said. But not yet. First the children, May 1st, evening. Magda Goebbels prepares her children for bed. She tells them they're going on a journey, a long journey. They need to rest first. The children, exhausted from days in the bunker, don't argue. They put on their nightgowns. They brush their teeth. Dr. Ludwig Stumpfager, Hitler's personal physician, is present. He has morphine. He has cyanide capsules. The plan is to sedate the children first, then administer the poison while they sleep. They won't feel anything. They won't know. Helga suspects something. She's 12, old enough to understand that something terrible is happening. She clings to her mother. Magda holds her, strokes her hair, sings softly. A lullaby from when Helga was small. One by one, the children fall asleep. The morphine works quickly. They lie in their beds, 6 small forms in white nightgowns, breathing slowly, peacefully. Then Magda crushes the cyanide capsules between their teeth. It takes only seconds. Their breathing stops. Their small bodies go still. Magda stands over them, tears streaming down her face, but she doesn't make a sound. She has murdered her children for ideology, for loyalty to a dead man and a dead cause. Goebbels enters the room. He looks at his dead children. His face is unreadable. He takes Magda's hand. They leave the room together, closing the door behind them. They climb the stairs to the garden above. The Reich Chancellery is in ruins. Fires burn everywhere. Soviet soldiers are only blocks away. The sound of fighting is constant, overwhelming. Goebbels and Magda stand together in the garden in the smoke and chaos of Berlin's death. An SS guard stands nearby with a pistol. The plan is for him to shoot them after they take cyanide to ensure death is certain. Magda bites down on her capsule first. She collapses. Goebbels watches her fall. Then he bites down on his own capsule. The guard shoots them both. Their bodies lie in the garden among the rubble and ruins. The master propagandist is dead. The man who controlled Germany's narrative for 12 years has written his final chapter. It ends with murder and suicide, with children killed by their parents, with a city in flames and a nation destroyed. Later, Soviet soldiers will find the bodies. They will find the children in their beds, peaceful in death, poisoned by the people who should have protected them. They will find Goebbels' diary, his final writings, his testament to a cause that brought only destruction. And they will find something else, something that reveals the ultimate irony of Joseph Goebbels' life. Throughout the war, Goebbels had controlled information ruthlessly. He decided what Germans could know, what they could read, what they could hear. He shaped reality through propaganda, made people believe in victory when defeat was certain, made them trust in leadership that was leading them to annihilation. But in his final days, Goebbels himself became the victim of propaganda. Hitler's propaganda, the Führer's delusions, became Goebbels' reality. The lies he had helped create trapped him as surely as they trapped millions of Germans. He believed until nearly the end that some miracle would save them, that Venn would arrive, that Steiner would attack, that the Western Allies would switch sides. He believed because he had spent 12 years teaching Germans to believe in the impossible, and his own techniques worked on him. The propagandist was propagandized. The manipulator was manipulated. The man who made others see illusions died in the grip of his own illusions. When the news came on April 25th that Berlin was completely surrounded, Goebbels finally confronted the one truth he could not spin. There was no escape, no relief, no miracle. Just the end he had always known was possible, but never truly accepted. His reaction, that moment of silence, that quiet statement, "No one is coming. We are alone," was perhaps the only completely honest thing Joseph Goebbels said in the final weeks of his life. And then, having acknowledged reality, he chose to die rather than live in it. He chose to murder his children rather than let them experience a world where National Socialism had failed. He chose loyalty to Hitler over everything else, including the lives of his own family. It was the final act of a true believer, a fanatic who could not bend, could not adapt, could not accept that everything he had devoted his life to was a lie. Berlin fell on May 2nd. Soviet soldiers raised their flag over the Hague. The war in Europe would officially end on May 8th. Germany was destroyed, partitioned, occupied. Millions were dead. Cities were ruins. The Nazi regime was finished, and in the garden of the Reich Chancellery, Joseph Goebbels lay dead among the rubble, his propaganda silenced at last, his words finally meaningless. His story ended not with the glory he imagined, but with the sordid reality he had always denied. The man who controlled the narrative died when the narrative became uncontrollable. The man who made others believe died when belief became impossible. The man who spoke for 12 years fell silent when silence was the only honest response. That is what happened when Joseph Goebbels learned Berlin was completely surrounded. He faced the truth he had spent his entire career denying. 8 prompt for image related to this script.